a package. I got a package. I got a package. Hey guys, welcome to Elevated Systems. I'm your host CJ and I'm pretty excited about today's video. I've been waiting for this enclosure since I saw it at CES back in January. Not that I was at CES, but I watched all the coverage of it, and every tech journalist, reviewer, and content creator who covered the InWin booth highlighted this, the InWin B1 Mini-ITX enclosure. I've been waiting ever since to get my hands on it. I've been checking the InWin website, Amazon, Newegg, Case King, and finally, a couple weeks ago, InWin tweeted the B1 would be available soon on Amazon. And I was like, soon when? So I checked Amazon every day and finally it was there. So against my own don't order anything non-essential online advice, I dropped my 85 bucks and 6 days later, here it is. Anyway, I'm rambling on. Yeah, I heard you, John. So let's get this thing unboxed. Looks like the accessory screws. All right, let's take out, this looks like the stand for mounting it vertically and the power cord. Okay, here it is. Now, unlike its predecessor, the Chopin, this 3.3 liter case is constructed almost entirely of ABS plastic with a tempered glass top panel. And despite my preconceived thoughts on that, the case is pretty solid. There's no flex. It weighs about 4.5 pounds, and you can tell that most of that weight is in the tempered glass and the included 200 watt power supply. I'm sure the plastic was a cost-saving choice, allowing InWin to include the 80mm pre-installed fan and the 200 watt 80 plus gold rated power supply, which is an upgrade over the Chopin's 150 watt unrated inclusion, while pricing it at just $85. But I have to say, it is a sharp looking case, which will go great on my entertainment center, along with the TiVo surround sound receiver and game consoles, which are also black ABS plastic. As for I/O, it's minimal with just one USB 3 Type A port and a CTIC headphone mic combo jack. And they kind of hid the power button in the vent design of the case. Okay, let's pop the top off this thing and see what's on the inside. And that can be done just by removing these two screws right here. And then pushing up on these two tabs. And that's it. And now you can get a good look at the tint on the tempered glass. And also, even though the entire circumference of the case looks vented, there's only two openings: the intake behind the PSU and on the fan side. In the chassis, we can see the aforementioned 200 watt 80 plus gold rated power supply with an air filter behind it, and on the other side is an 80mm exhaust fan. So in its out of the box configuration, it's basically a negative pressure setup, and you'd hope that all the air is pulled in through the filtered intake, but in reality, air is pulled in through any nook and cranny possible in a negative pressure environment. So that means dust. My plan is to flip the fan and use it as an intake, bringing fresh air directly to the CPU cooler. However, that's contingent on me being able to mod up a filter solution. More on that later. Let's finish looking at the case. And in here you can see the only thing fitting in here is a Mini-ITX motherboard with a max cooler height of 60 millimeters. And that's it. There's no support for a dedicated graphics card, so that means an APU only system. And like the Chopin, it looks like there is quite a bit of excessive cables. I, of course, will be taking care of that like I did in my Chopin, but not in this video. I already did that video. You can check it out here if you're interested. I do see they house the front panel I/O in a single DuPont housing. That's actually a mod I make in pretty much any case I build in, but it's nice to see case manufacturers are beginning to do it, considering the motherboard pinout is pretty much standardized at this point. And you can also see in here that there are 2 included SATA data cables. So let's flip this over and see how those are integrated into the case. And to do that, we're just going to remove these 2 screws right here and take this bottom panel right off to access your drive bay with 2 cold swappable 2.5-inch slots. The SATA cables were for the pre-installed SATA connectors in the drive bay. A nice little feature. There's also a cutout here which I think and hope will line up with my M.2 boot drive, which is mounted on the bottom of the motherboard I'm using for this build. Anyway, since I'm in the basement and case's overview is pretty much done, I might as well go ahead and show you how to install a drive down here. This is a 1TB Seagate Barracuda hard drive, which is a very inexpensive option for a storage drive that just contains all my games. Now, in our accessory bag, we have screws that look like this. So we're just gonna screw 4 of those screws into the bottom mounting holes of our hard drive until they stop. Now you're going to line up your screws with these holes here. And then just slide your drive down into the SATA connector. And that's it. To release the drive, you just pull down on this tab and you can slide it back out. Let's button the basement back up, but before I do, there is one more thing I want to show you. If you're going to use the case with its vertical mounting stand, you can remove the bottom feet here with these screws, and InWin provided in the accessory bag these little stickers that you can cover up those mounting points with. But I'm going to be using this as an HTPC and leaving it in its horizontal position, so I'm going to leave the feet on for now. Okay. Let's get the PC in this PC case. And here's the PC. All of it. All pre-assembled. So if you saw the build I did in the Chopin, this is it. I just took it out of the old InWin case and I'm gonna put it in the new InWin case. But to recap, here's all the pieces and parts. Starting with the brains of the operation. I've selected the Ryzen 2400G with integrated Vega 11 graphics. It's a 4-core, 8-thread CPU with a base clock of 3.6 GHz, an all-core turbo up to 3.75 GHz, and a single-core turbo up to 3.9 GHz. The Vega 11 graphics have a GPU clock speed of 1250 MHz. For memory, I have a 16 GB kit of Corsair Vengeance LPX DDR4 certified for 3200 MHz. For a boot drive, I'm using a 256 GB Sabrent Rocket NVMe M.2 SSD. I'll also be installing a 1TB Seagate Barracuda 2.5-inch hard drive for mass storage. All of this will be strapped to the ASRock Fatality B450 Gaming ITX AC motherboard. Yeah. That's it. So let's get it in, and I'm gonna start with a test fit because although InWin has increased the CPU clearance to 60 millimeters, the Wraith Stealth I have installed is 55 millimeters. So that leaves a very tiny 5 millimeter slot around the top of the cooler for the downdraft fan to pull air into. And I don't believe that's enough clearance for this cooler to work effectively. Now, to get the cooler to fit in the Chopin, I had to remove this top shroud, and then it still touched the top of the case, but that was okay because the top on this is mesh, not tempered glass. Yeah, there is definitely not a lot of clearance there. So even if I pull this shroud off, that's only going to give us another few millimeters of clearance. And that's better, but that's okay because I anticipated this because, you know, math. And for this build, I got an upgrade. The cooling solution I'm going with is the Noctua NH-L9A Chromax Black Edition. This cooler is only 37 millimeters high and has the same 65 watt TDP rating, and as a bonus, it should be quieter. However, it did raise the build cost by 50 bucks. Now, I'll include some charts later with temps for both the Stealth and the Noctua cooler, with the case fan in both intake and exhaust configurations to see if the $50 investment is worth it to you. However, if you're considering upgrading to the Ryzen 5 3400G, you'll definitely need an aftermarket cooler because that CPU comes with this Wraith Spire cooler, and this definitely isn't fitting in this case. So let's get this cooler swapped out and get this build done. Okay, one important thing to note when installing a motherboard in this case is this grounding wire right here. In a metal case, the PSU is grounded. It's screwed into the case, which becomes grounded. The motherboard is screwed into the case, which grounds it. Everything's plugged into the motherboard, alas, everything's grounded. Not the case with a plastic case. So we have to ground the motherboard by adding this grounding wire to this motherboard screw right here. Okay, so everything's installed and plugged in. There was a good amount of excess wire, but InWin included some zip ties and I was able to manage it pretty well. I did route the EPS cable under the motherboard, but the whole process, which I'll surely speed up and edit, took less than 5 minutes. So let's put the top back on. And before I power this up, I'm sure you noticed I didn't really take advantage of the glass top by adding any RGB elements. And that's because for me, this build is going to be an HTPC, and one thing I don't want in my home theater is a bunch of bright, colorful lights. But if you're into the RGB thing, this case does lend itself to that. Like, I'm thinking something like one of those super bendy Fantex neon RGB strips would go perfect right up in here to light up the whole build. Anyway, now I need to do a bunch of thermal testing, so those charts should be popping up next. Then I'll be back with my overall thoughts on the InWin B1. I tested each of the two coolers in 3 configurations. First, with the top of the case removed for a best case scenario, with the case fan in its exhaust configuration, and then with it flipped as an intake fan. All tests were performed with this case in its horizontal position. The Wraith Stealth cooler was tested with the plastic shroud removed. Idle temps are a 20-minute average with power settings set to balanced and all common Windows background processes running. The load temp is a maximum temp achieved from 5 consecutive Cinebench runs. The ambient room temperature was a consistent 22 degrees Celsius. From the chart, you can see that idle temps were consistent across all configurations with only a 3 to 5 degree variance between the two coolers. However, under load, the AMD stock cooler struggled to perform and temps approached the max CPU operating temperature. The Noctua cooler, however, was able to maintain load temps as low as 74 degrees Celsius with the intake fan configuration. Okay, the build's done, the testing is done. Let's talk about the good, bad, and the ugly of the InWin B1. I'll start with the good. Despite my doubts about a plastic PC case prior to getting it, once I did get my hands on it, I was impressed with the durability of the construction. It's a solid case. I've actually handled steel and aluminum cases in this form factor with more flex in them. And while the plastic may have reduced construction costs, it also allowed for what I believe is the enclosure's best attribute, the aesthetic. This is a very sleek, seamless, and polished case, which is both very modern, but also gives a kind of retro Art Deco feel of the 1930s. The full tempered glass panel lends itself very well to the look and also provides a lot of the structural stability to the plastic case. It allows enthusiasts to showcase some of the flashier components to further the aesthetic of their build. And I think it's also a first in the APU-only form factor. Oh, but what I said about putting an RGB strip in the top of the case, it doesn't work. I tried so I could light up the case for my B-roll shots. The top wouldn't go on. Anyways, moving on. The minimalist front I/O is a perfect fit for this case. And while I may argue that in 2020, a front I/O should include a USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-C port, for my intended use as an HTPC, this Type-A port is perfect as I'll be using it for my keyboard dongle. The 200 watt power supply is more than enough for pretty much any APU that is currently on the market and is really efficient. The system pulled an average of 24 watts at idle, and I saw a max of only 85 watts at load measured on my kilowatt. The incorporated SATA connectors are a smart addition, making drive installation easy and helping to reduce cables running to the drive bay. Also, my M.2 drive did line up perfectly with the slot, which is great. Now if I have a problem with that drive or want to upgrade it, I don't have to pull the whole motherboard out. However, if I did, it wouldn't be a very difficult or time-consuming task. I actually did pull the motherboard out a few times to swap coolers for testing, and I was even able to swap coolers out just by unscrewing the motherboard's 4 mounting screws and unplugging just the EPS cable, and I was able to swing the motherboard up and install a new cooler. Well, the AMD cooler. You have to take the board out completely to install the Noctua, but that's just because of the way the cooler mounts. Also, the addition of the case fan significantly assists with the system's cooling and is not typically seen in this form factor. Anyway, now the bad. And really, there wasn't anything obviously bad about the case. But to be fair, I'll point out some areas I think InWin can make improvements on. Not that anyone from InWin is going to actually see this, but first, the inclusion of the CTIC headphone mic combo jack in the front I/O is nice and keeps the minimal appearance. However, the inclusion of a splitter cable would have also been nice. As for cables, there have been some improvements made over the Chopin, and while I haven't worked with every Mini-ITX board there is, I'm sure there's a wide range of compatibility that had to be taken into consideration. I'm pretty sure at a minimum the 24 wires of the ATX power cable can be shortened along with the excess trimmed from the SATA power cable. Just that couple of inches of less wire can make a huge difference in cleaning up the amount of cables you need to shove between the front I/O, PCB, and the memory. Also, while I appreciate that InWin has recognized the market prevalence of Ryzen APUs in cooler height allowance, I mean, prior to the B1, cases in this form factor were designed for this standard Intel pancake cooler. While 60mm will technically allow you to install the Wraith Stealth, from my temperature testing, it isn't an ideal solution, as the clearance between the top of the cooler and the tempered glass just doesn't allow for enough airflow for the cooler to operate efficiently. Now, if you are just using this case for a basic desktop home office type build, the Stealth Cooler will work just fine, but remove this plastic shroud to give those extra few millimeters of airflow. The stress testing I did for temperature testing was worst case scenario, how even some moderate gaming sessions will drive temps up because the more heat soaked the heat sink on the Stealth gets, the fan just isn't able to draw in enough air to cool it. More heat in than heat out equals bad thermals. Now, I don't see any real improvements to the actual case design for this. Increasing the height or adding a mesh top would just kill the aesthetic of the case. So I just recommend that the end user consider adding a third-party low-profile cooler to their build like the NH-L9A I used. Now, there are other ways around this and cheaper solutions like undervolting your CPU. However, most people building this type of system probably aren't familiar or comfortable with doing this. But I think I'll do a follow-up on this build where I can do some undervolting and testing of some other cooling solutions like this. Very slim and very inexpensive AMD box cooler. My final critique is also in the cooling lane. Now, I completely understand why the fan is configured as an exhaust and the filter is installed where it is. This is the ideal configuration if you're going to orient the system vertically like this. Cool air in the bottom, hot air at the top. Heat rises, no need to fight thermal dynamics. However, for those of us who like options, the ability to swap the filter to the other side or a second filter included would be nice. My quick and dirty solution was simply sticking a piece of mesh filter in front of the intake fan with double-sided tape. I'll eventually come up with something better, a permanent solution. Finally, what's my overall conclusion on the InWin B1 Mini-ITX case? Well, since 2017, my favorite case in this form factor has been the InWin Chopin. Now the Chopin is my second favorite because I like the B1 better. Up until this point, all the APU build enclosures have been basically square metal boxes. The Chopin gave us some curves with its brushed aluminum shroud, but the B1 took it to the next level. There isn't a corner or square edge on this anywhere. It's really like nothing out there and will look great in any use case, whether it's sitting on your desktop or on your entertainment center. The InWin B1 has taken the Mini-ITX APU form factor from a practical space-saving box to a conversation-starting centerpiece of any setup. Well, that was my conclusion, and this is me concluding this video. Now, if you want to see how this system performs as a HTPC, a desktop computer, watch some gameplay and see benchmarks, I did a full video on that when I first built this system in the Chopin. This is the exact same system, just in a different case. So that video will be popping up over here. I hope you learned something. That is why I do what I do. If you like this video, be sure to hit that thumbs up. If not, please let me know what I can do to improve in the comments below. Those thumb down clicks on their own really don't help. Also, so you don't miss future content on this system and others, be sure to get subscribed. And I hope to see you in the next one.